Here's a question nobody asks anymore. Why did our grandparents sleep better at night with one income than we do with two? It's not nostalgia. In 1970, a single paycheck bought a house, raised kids, and still had margin for the unexpected. Today, two paychecks barely cover the same baseline, and we're one emergency away from crisis. Something fundamental shifted. Not just prices, not just wages. The entire structure of what it means to make enough has been rewritten. And here's the uncomfortable part. More money didn't solve the problem. It might have made it worse. If you've ever wondered why financial security feels further away the more you earn, you're not imagining it. There's a moment in American economic history that nobody really talks about, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's the moment when having a second income stopped being an advantage and became a requirement. In the 1960s and early 70s, if your household had two incomes, you were ahead of the game. You could save more, upgrade faster, build wealth at a pace your neighbors couldn't match. That second paycheck was optional leverage, a competitive edge. But here's what happened. When 20% of families had two incomes, those families won the competition for better houses, better school districts, better neighborhoods. The system still worked. There was still advantage to be gained. By the time we hit the 1990s and 2000s, over 60% of families had two incomes, and that's when the math flipped. When everyone brings two incomes to the table, nobody has an edge anymore. What was once optional leverage becomes the new baseline. The price floor shifts upward to match the new normal. Think about it like this. Imagine a neighborhood where half the families can only bid with one income, and half can bid with two. The two-income families get the best houses. Now imagine everyone has two incomes. Prices adjust. The same houses now cost twice as much. Nobody's position relative to each other has changed, but everyone's paying more just to stay in the same place. This is what economists call a coordination problem. Individually, you can't opt out without losing, but collectively, everyone playing the game doesn't make anyone better off. It just raises the cost of entry. And here's the part that matters. There's no market mechanism to fix this. No price signal that says, everyone, let's just agree to stop. Because the moment you stop, you lose access to what you're competing for. If you don't play, your kids don't get into the good school district. You don't get the house near your job. You don't get the daycare slot. So the second income stopped being extra. It became the minimum just to participate. Now here's where things get interesting. The problem isn't that we're spending more. The problem is what we're spending it on has fundamentally changed. There's a difference between a TV and a house in a good school district, and that difference explains almost everything. A TV is what economists call an absolute good. If everyone gets a bigger TV, everyone's TV experience gets better. Your 65-inch screen doesn't lose value because your neighbor also has one. We can all win at the same time. But a house in the top 20% of school districts? That's a positional good. Its value comes from where it ranks relative to everything else. By definition, only 20% of families can live in the top 20% of neighborhoods. If everyone has twice the income and bids twice as high, the same 20% of families still get those houses. They just pay double for the privilege. Here's what happened over the last 50 years. Middle-class spending shifted. In the 1970s, most of your budget went to absolute goods. Food, clothing, furniture, appliances. Things that get cheaper as we produce more of them. Today, housing, education access, healthcare, childcare slots, these are the budget killers, and every single one is positional. They're not things you consume, they're positions you compete for. When that shift happens, earning more doesn't solve the problem, because you're not buying products anymore, you're buying rank. And in a ranking system, everyone moving up together means nobody moves up at all. You're just running faster on the same treadmill. This is why you can't earn your way out of this. It's not about individual choices or being smarter with money. When the goods you need are positional by nature, More income just raises the bidding floor. The winner still gets the house near the good school. The competition just gets more expensive. And here's the part nobody talks about. When both parents work, that domestic production, the cooking, the cleaning, the child supervision, the household management, gets outsourced to the market. GDP goes up. Growth looks good on paper. But families aren't actually better off. They're just buying back at market rates what they used to produce themselves. They're paying someone else to do what one parent used to do for free. That's not wealth creation. That's converting unpaid labor into paid labor, and paying a markup for the privilege. The system counts it as economic growth. Families experience it as barely keeping up. So we've established that more income doesn't fix the problem. But here's what people miss. The real loss isn't about money at all. It's about two types of capital that dual-income families are hemorrhaging without even realizing it. First, there's time capital. And no, I'm not talking about exhaustion expenses or how much you spend on takeout. I'm talking about discretionary time. The hours in your day that aren't claimed by work, sleep, commuting, or basic survival tasks. The average dual-income family with kids has about 90 minutes of discretionary time per day. Total. That's an hour and a half for exercise, hobbies, seeing friends, being present with your partner, or just sitting down without an agenda. Everything else is already spoken for. And here's the trap. You might think, well, I'll just buy some of that time back. I'll pay for house cleaning, meal delivery, a lawn service. Except those services don't create discretionary time. They create work time. You're not buying an evening to relax. You're buying the ability to work more hours without the house falling apart. Time-saving services free up time you immediately fill with more obligations. Check email, coordinate schedules, handle the admin tasks that pile up. The time never becomes yours, it just cycles back into productivity. And unlike money, you can't earn more time. When both people are working full-time, that 90 minutes is about as good as it gets. You can't buy it back. It's gone. Now the second type of capital you're losing is optionality. And this one's subtle, but it matters more than almost anything else. In finance, an option is the right, but not the obligation, to do something in the future. It's valuable precisely because you haven't used it yet. Our grandparents' generation had a person at home, not because that person wasn't capable of working, but because that capacity was being held in reserve. It was an option they could exercise if needed. A job loss? Exercise the option. Medical emergency? Exercise the option. Aging parent needs care? You've got the capacity to respond. That option had value even when it wasn't being used. Maybe especially when it wasn't being used. It was financial flexibility in its purest form. Today's dual-income families have already exercised that option. Both incomes are fully deployed. There's no reserve capacity. When something goes wrong, and something always goes wrong eventually, there's nowhere to pull resources from. You're operating at 100% utilization with zero redundancy. It's not that you're doing anything wrong. It's that you've converted optionality into current consumption. You've traded the ability to respond to uncertainty for a slightly bigger house or access to a better school district. And once that option is exercised, it's expired. You can't get it back without fundamentally restructuring your life. Which, as we'll see, is a lot harder than it sounds. Now you might be thinking, okay, I get it. I need to structure my life so I'm not dependent on both incomes at full capacity. I'll just downsize. Smaller house, cheaper neighborhood, fewer commitments. Here's the thing nobody tells you. That's not a willpower problem. It's a neuroscience problem. Your brain doesn't process downsizing as returning to normal. It processes it as loss. And loss hurts in a way that gains never feel good. Studies on loss aversion show that losing something creates about 2 to 2.5 times more psychological pain than gaining the same thing creates pleasure. You move from a 2,000 square foot house to a 2,500 square foot house, You feel good for a few months, then you adjust. It becomes normal. But move back down to 2000, your brain doesn't readjust at the same speed. It keeps comparing to what you had. That extra bathroom, the bigger garage, the third bedroom you're not using anymore. You don't forget. You keep noticing what's missing. Economists call this the ratchet effect. Your standard of living can go up quickly, but it comes down slowly, painfully, with constant reminders that you used to have more. And here's what makes it worse. When you upgrade, you adapt within months and stop noticing the improvement. When you downgrade, that adaptation can take years. Your brain is wired to be sensitive to loss because, for most of human history, losing resources meant real danger. That wiring doesn't care that your slightly smaller house is still perfectly functional. So once you've upgraded your lifestyle to require both incomes, reversing that isn't just logistically hard, it's psychologically brutal. Every day you're reminded of what you gave up. Your brain treats it like a failure, even when it's financially the right move. This is why the only strategy that actually works is preventive, not corrective. Don't let your fixed costs expand to fill both incomes in the first place, because once they do, the ratchet has turned. And turning it back requires fighting your own neurology every single day. So here's the reframe that changes everything. The question isn't, how much can we earn? The question is, how much control can we retain? There are 3 types of control that actually matter, and income doesn't automatically buy you any of them. First, there's schedule control. Can you decide when you work, when you're available, when you take time off? Or does your calendar own you? Most dual-income families have zero schedule control. Both people are locked into someone else's timeline, coordinating around 2 employers, 2 commutes, daycare hours, school pickup. You're playing Tetris with other people's pieces. Second, there's risk control. When something goes wrong, and it will, can you absorb it without everything collapsing? A medical issue, a job loss, an aging parent who needs care. If both incomes are already fully committed, you've got no capacity to handle disruption. You're one surprise away from crisis mode. Third, there's decision control. Are you making choices based on what's best for your family, or based on what's financially necessary to keep the machine running? Can you leave a toxic job? Can you move for a better quality of life? Can you take a career risk? Or are you locked in because the mortgage requires both paychecks? Here's the thing. Income doesn't create control. Often, it trades control away. The more you earn by maxing out both incomes, the less control you actually have. You're generating cash flow, but you're giving up flexibility in exchange. And this is where the system really gets you. Banks will lend you money based on your combined income. They treat your future labor as collateral. You're essentially borrowing against your own future work capacity, which means you're locking yourself into years of having to show up, having to perform, having no option to step back. You're trading future control for present consumption. A bigger house today means less freedom tomorrow. A nicer car now means you can't afford to quit the job you hate later. Real wealth isn't about income or net worth. It's about degrees of freedom. How many options do you have? How many decisions can you make without asking for permission from your bank, your employer, your financial obligations? Here's a question worth sitting with. If someone offered you an extra $20,000 a year, but it cost you 20 hours a week, time you'd never get back, would you take it? Or would you rather have those 20 hours to spend however you want? Your answer tells you what you actually value. So back to that question from the beginning. Why did our grandparents sleep better with one income than we do with 2? It wasn't because they were smarter about money. It wasn't because life was easier. It's because they lived in a system that hadn't been distorted yet. The baseline hadn't shifted. Positional competition hadn't consumed everything. And critically, they still had something we've lost. The option to not play the game. When you only need one income to access the basics, housing, schools, healthcare, you're not forced into the competition. You can choose whether to deploy that second income or keep it in reserve. That choice is power. That choice is security. We don't have that choice anymore. The system requires both incomes just to get in the door, which means we're all playing a game we can't opt out of, competing for the same slots, bidding up the same prices, with no way to step back. This isn't about going back to the 1970s. You can't undo structural changes by wishing them away. But you can reclaim the principle. Keep options open. Don't commit to full capacity. Maintain control over your time and your decisions. Build your life so that you're not trapped by your own income. Because here's the thing. Wealth isn't about the number in your bank account. It's about the number of choices in your hands. And if you've given up all your choices just to afford the baseline, you're not wealthy. You're just busy.